But those gentlemen who intend to process the civil and ecclesiastical laws in the spiritual and maritime courts of this kingdom are, of all men, next to the common lawyers, the most indispensably obliged to apply themselves seriously to the study of our municipal laws. For the civil and canon laws, considered with respect to any intrinsic obligation, have no force or authority in this kingdom. They are no more binding in England than our laws are binding at Rome. But as far as these foreign laws, on account of some peculiar propriety, have in some particular cases, and in some particular courts, been introduced and allowed by our laws, so far they oblige, and no farther, their authority being wholly founded upon that permission and adoption, in which we are no singular in our notions. For even in Holland, where the imperial law is much cultivated and its decisions pretty generally followed, we are informed by Van Leuven that it receives its force from customs and the consent of the people, either tacitly or expressly given. For otherwise, he adds, we should no more be bound by this law than by that of the Almains, the Franks, the Saxons, the Goths, the Vandals, and other of the ancient nations. Wherefore, in all points in which the different systems depart from each other, the law of the land takes place of the law of Rome, whether ancient or modern, imperial or pontifical. And in those of our English courts wherein a reception has been allowed to the civil and canon laws, if either they exceed the bounds of that reception, by extending themselves to other matters, than are permitted to them, or if such courts proceed according to the decisions of those laws, in cases wherein it is controlled by the law of the land, the common law in either instance both may, and frequently does, prohibit and annul their proceedings. And it will not be a sufficient excuse for them to tell the king's courts at Westminster that their practice is warranted by the law of Justinian or Gregory, or is conformable to the decrees of the Rota or Imperial Chamber, for which reason it becomes highly necessary for every civilian and canonist that would act with safety as a judge, or with prudence and reputation as an advocate, to know in what cases and how far the English laws have given sanction to the Roman, in what points the latter are rejected, and where they are both so intermixed and blended together as to form certain supplemental parts of the common law of England, distinguished by the titles of the King's Maritime, the King's Military, and the King's Ecclesiastical Law. The propriety of which inquiry the University of Oxford has for more than a century so thoroughly seen that in her statutes she appoints that one of the three questions to be annually discussed at the Act by the jurists and scepters shall relate to the common law, subjoining this reason, quia juris civilis studiosos desit baud imperitus esse juris municipalis, e differentias exteri patriique juris notas habere. And the statutes of the University of Cambridge speak expressly to the same effect. From the general use and necessity of some acquaintance with the common law, the inference were extremely easy with regard to the propriety of the present institution, in the place to which gentlemen of all ranks and degrees resort, as the fountain of all useful knowledge. But how it has come to pass that a design of this sort has never before taken place in the University, and the reason why the study of our laws has in general fallen into disuse, I shall previously proceed to inquire. Sir John Fortescue, in his panegyric on the laws of England, which was written in the reign of Henry VI, puts a very obvious question in the mouth of the young prince, whom he is exhorting to apply himself to that branch of learning. Why the laws of England, being so good, so fruitful, and so commodious, are not taught in the universities, as the civil laws and canon laws are? In answer to which he gives, what seems, with due deference be it spoken, a very jejune and unsatisfactory reason, being, in short, that, As the proceedings at common law were in his time carried on 3 different tongues, the English, the Latin, and the French, that science must be necessarily taught in those 3 several languages, but that in the universities all sciences were taught in the Latin tongue only, and therefore he concludes that they could not be conveniently taught or studied in our universities. But, without attempting to examine seriously the validity of this reason, the very shadow of which, by the wisdom of your late constitutions, is entirely taken away, we perhaps may find out a better, or at least a more plausible account, why the study of the municipal laws has been banished from these seats of science, that what the learned chancellor thought it prudent to give to his royal pupil. That ancient collection of unwritten maxims and customs, which is called the common law, however compounded or from whatever fountains derived, has subsisted immemorially in this kingdom, and, though somewhat altered and impaired by the violence of the times, had in great measure weathered the rude shock of the Norman conquest. This had endeared it to the people in general, as well because its decisions were universally known, as because it was found to be excellently adapted to the genius of the English nation. In the knowledge of this law consisted great part of the learning of those dark ages. It was then taught, says Mr. Selden, in the monasteries, in the universities, and in the families of the principal nobility. The clergy in particular, as they then engrossed almost every other branch of learning, so, like their predecessors the British Druids, they were peculiarly remarkable for their proficiency in the study of the law. Nullus clericus nisi causidicus is the character given of them soon after the conquest by William of Malmesbury. Clergy in particular, as they then engrossed almost every other branch of learning, so, like their predecessors the British Druids, they were peculiarly remarkable for their proficiency in the study of the law. Nullus clericus nisi causidicus is the character given of them soon after the conquest by William of Malmesbury. The judges, therefore, were usually created out of the sacred order, as was likewise the case among the Normans, and all the inferior offices were supplied by the lower clergy, which has occasioned their successors to be denominated clerks to this day. But the common law of England, being not committed to writing, but only handed down by tradition, use, and experience, was not so heartily relished by the foreign clergy, who came over hither in shoals during the reign of the Conqueror and his 2 sons, and were utter strangers to our constitutions as well as our language. And an accident, which soon after happened, had nearly completed its ruin.